Well, Nicole, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk about your book. And I've read it. It's called The Two FBIs. I think a lot of people pretty much, I know anybody in the conservative movement who is of any substance has heard of it and has read it and has had great things to say about it. And I would say, chief of which was Donald Trump himself. Pretty cool endorsement there, I would say. So, for people that don't know, this is Nicole is a former FBI agent and now Fox News commentator, a contributor rather, and really, really interesting career before the Bureau, hedge fund experience, and some other things too. It's all in her very interesting book. So, thank you for taking time out of your day again to talk to me about your book.
I really appreciate it because you are what I refer to in my book as FBI one. You are an amazing human being. You served with honor and you did the right thing for the right reasons. And that is what the amazing FBI one is all about. And so it's been my honor and my privilege to get to know you post FBI experience. I didn't know you while I was at the agency at the Bureau. But I'm really grateful for what you've done for our country, and I'm grateful that I have this chance to talk to you. So thank you.
Well, I have really enjoyed the opportunity to get to know you. I wrote a town hall piece about you a while back. I think it was after your first congressional appearance. I think that's when it was. And I've always been impressed with who you are and with your character and your experience and your background and your relentless commitment to the Constitution and making sure that, our institutions are faithful to the Constitution. And your book is really honest, very clearly written. I really enjoyed reading it. I think anybody who's interested in FBI matters or in some of the more controversial aspects of the Bureau, like Crossfire Hurricane, the J6 investigations, the Hunter Biden laptop. I think you did a really good job in your book of breaking down some of these complicated issues for people who may not be really familiar with the FBI or DOJ or how these things are handled. But one question I wanted to ask you, and it actually goes to the back of your book, and you talk about you felt the best avenue for you instead of the quote unquote whistleblower route that some people have gone. You thought that the best way to handle these issues was to resign and then have
Correct.
a voice. Can you explain more about your thinking process behind that and what motivated you to do that?
Right. So again, John, I truly love being an FBI special agent. It felt like a mission to me. If we backtrack just a little bit in my book, what led me to the FBI was that I witnessed the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York City. Back when I was working at Merrill Lynch, I was there in New York. I was working 8:46 a.m. I hear the loud crash, and I go through and I detail it in my book. It was absolutely horrifying. It's something that our nation must never, ever forget. We were under attack and it changed our country. It changed the world.
Mm.
And I think it's something that, again, we have to remember. We must never say that. We say never forget 9/11. It's kind of cliche, but I truly believe that we must never forget so that something like this never, ever happens again. So, I detail it all in my book, but fast forward, I go to the FBI and it was an incredible experience. I loved being there and I did. I felt like I was on a mission. And because I witnessed 9/11 terrorist attack, it was my way to give back and to serve our country. I think everyone serves in their own way. And the FBI just was something that I felt was important. I applied, I got in. And so I was loving what I was doing. And I felt like I was truly making a difference in the lives of the American people. I started working white collar crime because of my financial and Wall Street background. And then 4 years in, I shifted over to violent crime. And I saw some very evil, dark things. I worked multiple mass shootings. I'm sure we'll talk about some of these things later, but I felt like I was making a difference until the negativity up at the top, and it really did infiltrate throughout the organization. I felt like it was deafening the work of good FBI one. So FBI two, the political and social justice warriors, which I refer to, not, the side of the FBI that we're not proud of, the side that really destroyed the bureau, it seemed to be outweighing FBI one at the end of my time at the bureau. And I said, you know what? I've tried to do those employee surveys. I've tried to do what I can to voice my concerns. And again, we all know that those surveys, I was told, Director Rave reads every single one. And I thought, you know what? I
Sure.
never have tried this. I'm going to actually do it. And I filled one out. I used every single character space possible to put in my concerns. Is it really going to make a difference what I say down in FBI Miami? Probably not. And so I just continue to pray. Frankly, I prayed. I'm a woman of faith. And the answer continued to be at the very end, you are going to have a stronger impact outside of the bureau than you will inside.
Mhm.
And again, I spoke to my father, who is a very amazing mentor to me and has been a guiding light to me my entire life. And originally he said, Nicole, if you walk away from the bureau and all of FBI one walks away, you're going to be left with nothing. And then it's all going to be FBI two. And then who's going to save America? Who's going to help us? Who's going to conduct these investigations? Who's going to be fair? Who's going to call them out? And I said, Dad, I agree with what you're saying, but when I explained to him how large of the bureaucracy it really was, he said, I agree. After understanding from my perspective, he said, you're right. And he said it would probably take years to start fixing the FBI from the moment that we got a new director. And again, I left during the Biden administration. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if we were going to get President Trump back into office who could, potentially clean house there. And
Right.
so I did. I walked away, but the decision to resign, I didn't see a need to be a whistleblower, a quote unquote whistleblower. I tell the truth. I have the truth on my side. I have experience. I lived it. I worked it. I witnessed it and I saw it. So I did. I made the decision to walk away. I did not come to the FBI for a pension, and I certainly was not going to stay there for a pension.
Mhm.
And so things became so drastically bad. Like it was just going off the rails. And in my book, I detail particularly in the last chapter some of those items that you've listed and mentioned because it was one after another. FBI 2, FBI 2, FBI 2. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to take a leap of faith and I am going to trust in God.
Mhm.
And you know what, John? When I left, I didn't have anything lined up at Fox News. I didn't have a job lined up.
Right.
But
Mhm.
you know what I had? I had my faith and I had my trust in God. And I
Mhm.
had my confidence and I had the truth on my side. And so I did. I made the difficult decision. And again, there were a series of other things that were contributing factors. And I quietly walked away. I didn't make a big fuss. I didn't have a going away party. I didn't do anything. I just quietly turned in my things, turned in my gun, turned in my badge, turned in my credentials, all of the items that we have to return when we don't retire. And I did. I walked away. But I think it's also important to note I tried to leave the FBI one time before I actually ended up resigning.
Oh,
And I
really?
spoke with the management and they said, you know what? We cannot afford to lose someone like you. We really think you're making an emotional decision because I had lost my best friend in the FBI. And they
Mhm. Right.
said, why don't you just give it a little bit more time and let's see how things go? And so I detail that in my book as well. I didn't just walk away when things got, I didn't agree with what was happening. I stuck it out and I gave the Bureau a chance to turn around. But when Christopher Wray could not even acknowledge that the FBI had issues, I knew that there was no chance of them changing. And so I
Mhm.
stayed an additional 10 or 11 months. I went back to the acting SAC at the time and I said, look, I've made this decision. And again, they said, what can we do to keep you here? You're the type of agent that we want to keep. And I said, you know what? And we spoke for a lengthy period of time, over an hour.
Mhm.
And I just said, you know what? I have prayed about it and I know that this is the right decision and I respect what you're asking of me and I have considered it already and it is not something I'm interested in doing and I'm going to walk away.
Mhm. Well, your decision to resign actually from the get-go in terms of the way I perceived you was that it gave you more credibility. Whistleblowers can do things the right way, and I think the IRS whistleblowers are a perfect example of that. And you have other whistleblowers that did not do things the right way, but I think that the way you handled that and just making that decision to resign, I think demonstrated a level of character and commitment that maybe some other people don't really have. So that always impressed me initially. And that's why I wanted to begin with that question because I was interested in your thought process. And I didn't realize it was almost a year between the first conversation you had with your SAC and your final determination to go ahead and resign. And I know some of that had to do with your good friend Laura Schellenberger. And you really go into detail in your book about that relationship. And I think it's a really, really interesting and touching part of your book. The other thing that I really like about your book and what you had to say is how you discuss what a great impact that your dad had all throughout your career. And so I'm sure your dad is really proud and happy to read your book from that perspective. But
Yes.
to go back kind of to the beginning, I didn't, we've had conversation before and you've mentioned some of your hedge fund experience, but I didn't really know some of the detail that you provide in your book. And some people that may be a little bit dismissive of you uh, have no idea the depth of your experience and the depth of your experience in the bureau because you mentioned a lot of the bigger cases that you were involved in, like the shooting at the Fort Lauderdale airport, and of course the tragic Parkland shooting as well. But can you give me just a little bit? So, how did you get involved in Wall Street? In I know you didn't start out at a hedge fund. I think you started out at was it Bank of America? Is that
Merrill Lynch.
Merrill
Yes,
Lynch? I'm
Merrill Lynch.
sorry.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yep.
how did you
So
get?
I mean, it's an interesting, again, you bring up so many points. And I just, before we even start there, I would like to say that one thing that I think that made my separation from the Bureau unique or different than what you see in other people is that I genuinely love the Bureau.
Mhm.
I
Right.
wasn't asked to leave the Bureau. I never had a beef with the Bureau. I didn't have any issues. I never had an OPR. I never had any administrative or, disciplinary actions against me.
Well, that's a
And
big
that,
distinction. That's a big, it's a
well,
big
and that
distinction.
gives you a level of confidence because you know what, John, like I said, I actually love being an agent. And
Right.
I worked shoulder to shoulder with some amazing patriots and people that love this nation. And one of them being my very dear friend, Special Agent Laura Schwarzenberger. She was my best friend in the FBI. And she was shot and
Schwarzenberger,
killed.
right. I
Yeah.
mispronounced earlier.
No, she
Yes.
was shot and killed in the line of duty. And she was a hero. And
Hmm.
she was protecting children, executing a warrant for a child predator. She deserves better than that. And so that's one of the reasons I'm like, I've got to get out here and be a voice because no one should be destroying her legacy. And that's something that I was proud of for her and her family, her husband, her young boys. They
Hmm.
should be proud that their mother worked for the FBI, not ashamed. And so there was so much negativity going on at the Bureau, but I knew that there were amazing people working, quietly behind the scenes doing the right thing. So
Hmm.
again, it goes back to FBI 1 and FBI 2. And so the people that want to whine and complain about how terrible the Bureau is, look, it has problems. I acknowledge that. That's why I walked away. But to not acknowledge the fine men and women who have literally sacrificed their lives, Special Agent Laura Schwarzenberger, Daniel Alvin, three other agents that were killed, that were shot but survived. These are these are sacrifices that people are making. I know myself, I was working tirelessly around the clock. I was ranked, we were on the number one ranked violent crime fugitive task force in the country. And
Hmm.
it was my honor and privilege to work with some amazing men. I was the only female on that squad. And we worked very hard. We worked long hours, but you know what? It meant something. We felt that we were saving people's lives. And so I think that's an important distinction to make. You can
Definitely.
disagree with what FBI 2 is doing, but you really need to always honor and respect FBI 1
Mhm.
because there are two FBIs and not the entire FBI is FBI 2. And that to me is disrespectful when individuals do not pay tribute to the current and former retired and heroic individuals who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And so that's one thing I just wanted to make sure that we very clearly is that I like your legacy, John. Like you worked very hard at the Bureau. You deserve to be proud of what you did at the agency. It should not be dragged through the mud because of FBI too and people like Jim Comey and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and all of the others.
Right.
So again, it goes back to FBI 1 versus FBI 2. We always want to honor and respect FBI 1 while we call out FBI 2. And we should all say, you know what, there are some changes that need to be made, but there are still amazing people doing heavy lifting at the organization.
Mhm.
So going back to a little bit about my background that you were asking, that's right. I started off, I graduated from high school when I was 16. I went off to Brigham Young University. I graduated before I was 20 when I graduated. I thought it would be amazing to live in New York City. I'd visited there before. I loved it, and I loved the energy of New York, the opportunities. I did. I went out there. I did an internship originally. I decided I wanted to stay. My parents never gave me a dime. I've
Mhm.
had a job since I was 15 years old, and
Mhm.
I've worked very hard. And I was raised in a family with 7 children. And my dad said, if you want something in this life, you're going to work for it. And that's what I did. And so I learned strong work ethic from a very young age because I knew that I wanted to have a bright future. And that was what was required. And so I did. I went to New York, did a number of things. I started off at Merrill Lynch. Like I said, I was working for the chairman of Merrill Lynch International the morning of September 11th. He was actually in Japan. I worked with his business manager. She was telecommuting that day from New Jersey. So I was at Merrill Lynch. When my boss ended up retiring, I stayed at Merrill Lynch. I went into private wealth management, ultra high net worth clients with a minimum net worth of $30 million. I got my Series 7. I got my Series 63. I got my brokerage
What
licenses.
does that mean? What is Series 7 and Series 63? What does that mean?
So those are securities exams that you have to have in order to give financial advice. And so those are things that you have to have, in layman's terms, it's a stockbroker, let's say. So you cannot be working in a financial capacity and working with clients and investors, for instance, if you do not have those brokerage licenses
Oh,
underneath your
gotcha.
belt. They are not fun, but you know what? Again, I worked hard, I studied, I got them done. So I did. I stayed at Merrill Lynch. Then I ended up eventually going to Bank of America Securities, working in prime brokerage, which is we were managing money for hedge funds.
Mm.
I'm sure that you're familiar with hedge funds. We were doing very large deals. I talk about some of the deals that we did just to kind of give a little bit of color as to where my background was prior to
Right,
joining the bureau. And then I went from prime brokerage in New York City. I became a vice president before the age of 30, which you were kind of teasing me about.
right.
But it wasn't easy. It was extremely difficult. It was stressful. A lot of weight on your shoulders when you're managing that type of money and those types of operations. But I did it. And then I decided, you know what? I think I want to leave New York. I ran marathons. I wanted to be somewhere warmer. And so I looked into different opportunities. I found a hedge fund in Los Angeles through a connection that I had. So I had been servicing and working with hedge funds in New York. And then I switched over to working at a hedge fund. And that was again, very complex. It was very stressful,
Mm.
but I did it. We managed about 20 billion in assets. Again, it was out in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
but I knew that I was where God needed me to be at various stages of my career.
Mhm.
But I continued to work in that, and I thought, you know what? I made a vow to myself September 11th and a vow to God that one day I would give back to our country. And that's actually, I went back to New York. I visited a friend I'd worked with at Bank of America on Wall Street. And he said, have you ever considered applying to the FBI? And I thought, no, I have not. I don't come from a law enforcement family. But the way he described it, this was after the subprime mortgage meltdown was going down. And he's like, they could send you into hedge funds and all these companies undercover, and you could bust them up because you have the institutional knowledge to be able to do those sorts of things. And I thought, you know what, that
Sure.
sounds really fascinating. And it's a way that I can serve my country. And so I did. I went back to Los Angeles from that trip. I went on to FBI.gov and I started filling out the special agent application online.
Mm. Well, this isn't just an FBI book in the sense that your description of your experience at 9/11, during 9/11 was really, really interesting to me. I mean, you're an eyewitness of the things that occurred in your perspective, especially trying to get off the island, and the longer term ramifications of witnessing events like that, I thought was very fascinating. So I'm glad you included that in your book. And I was also really amused at your description of Quantico and kind of the culture shock.
Yeah. That's an understatement. I'm like,
Yeah,
what did I just do? I just went from a hedge fund to this.
right.
It was quite an adjustment, but again, I'm the fifth of seven children. I mean, I did it. It was not pleasant. Frankly, I don't know anyone that loved Quantico. Maybe you loved it. Did you love it? I don't know. I
No,
did not.
I didn't love it.
Yeah, I've never met anyone that loved it. I actually couldn't stand it. And
Right.
I kept thinking the whole time, what am I doing here? But when you pray and when God leads you somewhere and doors start opening and you go through them, you have to trust that He's in charge and you're where He needs you to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I was reading through your description of Quantico. I never did see a rat, but roaches, I did see a few roaches.
Yeah. No, we caught a mouse in a mouse trap
I
with
know,
peanut butter.
yeah,
I think I
yeah, I
talked about
saw
it in my book. It was disgusting. It like ate nutter. There were mice. Like I would keep nutter butters in my desk because I love them. And one night I could hear it scurrying in the desk, a mouse. And sure enough, I woke up the next morning. My nutter butters were basically gone. The Ziploc bag had been eaten through, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And we had a bed bug problem as well. So it was
I never heard
mice,
that either. I never
roaches,
heard the
and bed
really
bugs.
bed bugs.
Bed bugs.
All
It was
right.
disgusting. Yeah, our
Uh,
roommates, they had to be moved out of their room. It was horrifying.
really?
But you know what? You suck it up and you do it, and
Right,
I made it through. So,
right, right. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your process. So how long did it take you to finish this book? And when I mean finish, begin your manuscript to the time you delivered it to your publisher. How long did that take?
the actual writing, I'm trying to think because first you have to establish. I had an agent.
Mm,
This I got the book deal. I have an agent at CAA.
mm,
They helped me to find a collaborator. I wrote a book proposal. They shopped it around. I was very fortunate and blessed to land with HarperCollins
mhm, mhm,
with the broadside imprint, conservative imprint at HarperCollins.
mhm.
And then, you've always got to wait for the contracts to come through. And so it took some time, but once the contracts were signed and we got going, I know that my first real draft of the completed book was due last December, December 20th, I believe. And then my book ended up publishing November 11th of the following year. So
Mhm.
leading up to that, I would say that the first draft of the manuscript was completed within 7 months,
That's
probably.
pretty good. That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
and then
Yeah.
the whole process, the FBI has to approve the manuscript. So I submitted that manuscript to the FBI for approval. That took, um, that takes some time,
Six
and I
months.
think they even kind of fast tracked it a bit. I think it was much faster than other people. I've
Was
heard
it
of other
six
people where
months?
it takes 9 months. I would say about 5 months.
Oh, that is pretty quick. Yeah. Hmm.
Yes. So I got FBI approval. They return it back to you. And there were very, very limited notes on mine. We
Mm,
obviously know that we're never allowed to reveal confidential human sources, sensitive investigative techniques,
right.
classified detail.
Mm,
I did not include any of that in my book. And again, when the book is factual and the book is true, I wasn't someone who violated FBI policies. So they
mhm.
didn't have to worry about me putting information that was obtained because I had violated a policy.
Right.
Um, so it really was not that difficult of a process. It's just that it takes time because I think there's a backlog of authors that are submitting
Oh,
manuscripts to the
definitely.
FBI.
Well, I was also really amazed at how much detail you were able to remember, like all the way back, through your career. Is that a result of going back and doing some research or notes that you can, like you talked about the three-ring binder you got at Quantico? I
Yeah,
can't even remember. I don't even remember that stuff. So
yeah.
was that just stuff that you tend to remember, or was there more research involved in getting the
Um,
facts together?
No, I tend to remember things and I really don't write down much, but I also had a lot of that material. I'd saved some things from Quantica. Everyone else like threw everything away. And I was like, you know
Right.
what, maybe one day.
That was smart.
Now it's all, I've
Yeah.
trashed all of it since. But it's interesting because at the FBI, I never really wrote down anything. The first chapter is about two little girls that I was helping with an operation on, and they were on the verge of having to enter into foster care because we'd arrested both parents and there was nowhere to take them.
Right.
That was a defining moment for me in my career. There were many dark, dark moments, but that was actually a moment that was light. And I do remember I didn't tell my family or loved ones much about anything that I did at the FBI for obvious reasons, but that was a story that really hit me hard. And I remembered I wrote down some notes from that and I made sure and I documented that because it was such a miraculous event to me. And I always love to see the hand of God in my life.
Mhm.
And so it was really interesting to go back and write the book because originally that wasn't even in the book. And then I talked to my
Oh, really?
editor.
Mm.
Yeah. And my editor's like, I think that's such a powerful story. In fact, I think
Definitely.
we should put it at the front of the book because
Mhm.
it shows it's a faithful story, and that's what the FBI used to really kind of they appreciated people of faith. They appreciated people that knew that we couldn't do the job on our own necessarily, and turning it over to God. And although we don't mix our religion with our business, I think that the FBI has historically been known to have many individuals. You have to believe in God when you're seeing this darkness. There is nowhere else to turn many times. And so that was a very powerful story. And that was one that I actually had taken very good notes. But what's interesting is I had a feeling in my soul, even before I left the Bureau, that one day I would share or write a book or again continue to stand as a witness. And so I started writing down memories, things that I remembered, starting from my childhood
Mm.
all the way through what I remembered at the FBI.
Okay.
So I literally
Mm.
had 400 pages typed of things that I had documented,
Really?
and that really helped the process
Oh, yeah,
drastically.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Drastically.
Well, I think I saw something on social media where you were contemplating trashing your kind of your manuscript notes. I hope you didn't. Did you do that or do you...
It's funny that you ask. Just today, I threw away one of the versions, but I kept the most recent one. And this is just interesting
Okay.
how the process works. I had never written a book before. I didn't know how much the editor would be editing. You've got editors, copy editors, legal review, all of these things. And I just remember thinking, oh, well, surely the editor's going to go in and fix all the sentences and make them sound amazing. And uh, they didn't exactly do that necessarily. They leave
Yeah.
a lot of it up to you. And so one of the later versions of my book, I thought, oh, this is my last chance. And so I did. I went in and I just started making massive adjustments. And this was after the book was already put onto the pages. And
Mhm.
so it's in a PDF at that point. So you're supposed to be doing minimal changes, but I kept seeing things and I'm like, I've got to fix this. So I took it back to my editor at the end and they're
Sure they
like,
loved
we were
you.
expecting about 50 changes and you have 1,500. And I said,
Oh my gosh.
well, sorry, but we're going to have to do that. And they were very accommodating. And you understand because when you write a book and your name's going to be on it,
Sure.
you want it to be something that you're proud of. And
Of
so,
course.
look, what it ended up being, of course, I could have done a lot more work on it, but I probably could have worked on it for years to get it to perfection.
Absolutely. Mhm.
My hope and prayer is that where my imperfections couldn't make it happen. I hope that the spirit of the book and that God can present the facts, open people's hearts, touch people's minds, and, you know, deliver the message that He wants people to feel.
Well, I don't think you should be worried about that at all. Your writing's very clear and concise. So, and it's very enjoyable reading. So I think I'm sure, and I'm sure you've heard many, many good reviews of your book. And I'm one in particular that is more than happy to continue to promote your book because there's a lot of great information in it. And I know we're starting to run a little short on time here, but one thing I did really like is how you drew the connection between between Comey's exoneration of Hillary and the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. I don't think many people understand the relationship between those two investigations and how individuals were involved in both investigations. And like you, I was dumbfounded when I listened to that press conference of Jim Comey exonerate Hillary Clinton of something that you and I would have been fired for and prosecuted and most likely been the subject of a counterintelligence investigation. And people don't understand that it was some of that data was top secret, but it was also part of a very special, a SAP program. So it's not an additional classification. It's a controlled designation, but it means very, very limited people are involved with that information. So the gravity of what she did, I think, is still today lost on most of the American people. But
And I do agree with that. It was July 5th of 2016, and that's when I realized that the FBI, I started in 2010, and that's the moment that I'm like, we are now a political pawn. And watching
yeah,
that press conference with Jim
yeah.
Comey basically reading an indictment and then saying no reasonable prosecutor would charge her. Okay, well, that's interesting because when it came to President Trump, where was the reasonable prosecutor that wouldn't charge him? There was a lineup of people that were willing to charge President Trump. And that's exactly what happened. They took the Operation Midyear Exam is what the Hillary Clinton, most people don't even know the name of that operation.
That's
They all know
right.
Crossfire Hurricane because
Yep,
they
right.
all wanted to go after Trump. The Operation Midyear Exam with Hillary Clinton, it was just downright what she did was wrong. And so they
Yeah.
did. It was the individuals that were up at headquarters, that were up at WFO, that said, okay, you know what? Let's take our attention away from this one and let's pivot over here. And so they literally used Crossfire Hurricane and started to go after Trump and his campaign to deflect and to take people's eye off of Hillary Clinton.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what their goal was. And then it went on and on and on, and they had no limits. What they did in Crossfire Hurricane is wrong. I really hope that people are held accountable. Unfortunately, there are statute of limitations that have expired, but there is a grand conspiracy charge that is apparently being investigated behind the scenes. We don't exactly know all of those details, but I think that the key is that there has to be accountability because, in my opinion, James Comey destroyed the FBI. And I don't think that it's ever fully recovered.
I
And I know they're
agree.
working tirelessly now, and I appreciate their efforts. But when people walk in and complain, oh, Kash Patel hasn't done this or that, do you
Mhm.
understand that what he walked into, this didn't start overnight? These are problems that have been going on for over 10 years. It's been going on for over a decade. And so I know we don't have much time, but I'd like to commend the current administration. I would like to commend President Trump. I've had conversations with President Trump.
Mhm.
What I'll tell you is he loves this country and he loves FBI One. He
Mhm.
loves the people that are doing the right thing for the right reasons and making America safe. So does Pam Bondi, so does Kash Patel, and so do the fine men and women at the FBI. And so the goal is to build up FBI One while they completely obliterate and take down FBI Two.
Mhm.
And so I want to believe that in the end, good will win. And I
Mhm.
know it's going to take time, even at the FBI. People want immediate results. Frankly, I think we've seen a tremendous number of outstanding results in just a year.
Oh, I
What is
agree.
it?
Mhm.
Six most wanted that have been captured in 1 year.
Yes.
And under the Biden administration, there were four total in 4 years. I mean, it's night and day. Like
14
they're not doing
14,000
January 6th
arrests.
misdemeanors right
Yeah.
now.
Right. Right. No,
So
your point is well taken. I mean, there's a lot of tremendous work that's being done in Patel and Bondi and all the individuals, former Deputy Director Bunch, all these folks have been working very hard to course correct and to repair the damage done by Jim Comey. Comey was really a watershed moment in FBI history, and I agree with your assessment 100%. It was devastating, devastating to morale, devastating to public trust, and we're going to be digging out of that hole for a while. But I take a lot of confidence in Trump's appointees and in Trump himself, as you were just relating, really being supportive of what you call FBI One. So that's very, very
and
good.
I'm just going to share one more thing about President Trump because I
Sure.
think this is very important. Most people don't understand how much President Trump genuinely cares. And I felt it was important to put in my book at the very end, President Trump personally called me.
Hmm.
And I don't know exactly what, I'm not going to go into every detail of the conversation, but I had the opportunity to tell him about Laura.
Hmm.
And I literally, people can say what they want. I've heard some negative, nasty comments that I'm a crybaby or whatever. I have a heart, I have a soul, and I genuinely care. And for those that don't, you probably have no place at the FBI or anywhere in law enforcement, because if you don't have empathy and compassion for people, you're probably in the wrong job.
Hmm.
But rather than focusing on that, so I'm talking to President Trump, and I got very emotional. And I was explaining to him what happened to her and that we never got an explanation. We never were told, and how she paid the ultimate sacrifice. I don't think that's what President Trump was expecting to hear on that conversation.
Mm.
But what I'll tell you is he quietly listened. And I was very apologetic. I said, President Trump, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to be emotional. This is probably not why you called. And he said, No, I genuinely care. You never have to apologize. And I want to hear what you have to say. And he listened and he cared. And that to me is the side of our president that every American should know. But he doesn't flaunt that. He doesn't brag about that. But he has a huge heart. And what I can say again, he loves the people and the heroes of FBI One.
Well, that is really encouraging to hear, and that is such a rare quality in someone in his position.
Well, and especially because of what the Bureau FBI too did to his
Well,
family.
yes,
I
right.
mean, they went after him. They did everything they could to destroy him. It would be so easy for him to say, "I hate the entire FBI,"
Yes.
but you know what? He made the distinction, just like, and I think that's really, he has strongly endorsed my book
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
President Trump lived it. He knows that it's true. He was the victim of FBI too. He knows that what I'm saying is factually correct. But even President Trump, after his family was so deeply wronged, can acknowledge there are good people like Special Agent Laura Schwarzenberger and Daniel Alfin that deserve to be respected.
Well, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up. I want to be respectful of your time. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about your book. And I really enjoyed reading it. I know a lot of people are going to enjoy reading it. So it's been a pleasure getting to know you. And you know what? I'm going to be sending this copy to you because I would like your John Hancock
I
on
will
this one.
sign
So,
it. I will do it. The pleasure is all mine. And like I said, John, you're doing amazing work. And it was my honor to work with agents like yourself. Y'all are
yeah.
incredible. And I have the deepest respect for you and the work that you did and all of the amazing people, current and retired, from FBI One.
Well, likewise, the respect and the feelings are mutual. So again, thank you for taking time out of your day, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Thank you.